Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Washington. And in Washington on Monday, President Obama gave a press conference where he spoke about the fight with the Republican Party over raising the debt ceiling. And here's a little bit of what he said.
I've been hearing from my Republican friends for quite some time that it is a moral imperative for us to tackle our debt and our deficits in a serious way. I've been hearing from them that this is one of the things that's creating uncertainty and holding back investment on the part of the business community. And so what I've said to them is, let's go. And it is possible for us to construct a package that would be balanced, would share sacrifice, would involve both parties taking on their sacred cows, would involve some meaningful changes to Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid that would preserve the integrity of the programs.
Now joining us to dissect President Obama's press conference and this battle over the debt ceiling is Tom Ferguson. Tom is a senior fellow at the Roosevelt Institute in New York. He also teaches at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Hi there.
So just before we get started, let me play you just one other little clip, which is a question that was asked at the news conference. Here it is.
The latest CBS News poll showed that only 24% of Americans said you should raise the debt limit to avoid an economic catastrophe. There are still 69% who oppose raising the debt limit. So isn't the problem that you and others have failed to convince the American people that we have a crisis?
So, Tom, 24% say raise the debt ceiling. 69% say don't do it. Where are you, in the 69 or the 24?
I think I'm sort of like John Kerry on the war in Iraq. That is to say, I might be against it before I was for it. That is to say, look, in practical terms, you don't have any alternative but to raise it, it seems to me. On the other hand, there is no doubt that you could do changes in the U.S. budget situation that would probably obviate the need for that. But, you know, they're not going to do it. You know, now I wouldn't do what the president's proposing, and certainly not what the Republicans are doing. But they,
but before you go there, let's quickly, I know we've said this before in some of our other interviews, but let's say what's it? I mean, in theory, if President Obama wanted to go and fight for a different vision, I mean, how would you deal with the debt situation without raising the debt ceiling?
Well,
I mean, I know it's imaginary, but what if we went back to the days not long ago when the Democrats controlled both houses?
Well, you could simply start. I mean, he's already announced plans to withdraw 33,000 American troops from Afghanistan over a relatively long period. Pull them all out. Not just the 33,000, but everybody else. Everybody, in effect, is around the place is saying, none of this keeping this war going there doesn't make sense if you're doing those withdrawals on that scale anyway. And they're not going to achieve anything if they dumped another 100,000 in Afghanistan. They could widen the perimeter around Kandahar. When they pull them out, it will narrow again. You could do things like that to stop some of it. You could also, as ridiculous as this sounds, though it wouldn't solve your problem in 1 month. You could try stimulating the economy, getting people back to work, and getting tax revenues up. But the White House long ago decided not to do that. So, I mean, I actually think, Paul, as I say, they're going to have to do it in the very short run, but there is just no justification for the type of package the president is proposing. And
okay, I'm just going to say once really fast, because we've done it in other interviews, but 3 things you and I have talked about, and we've talked about on the Real News, 3 things that could have been done and were not. Number 1, serious cuts to the military budget. Number 2, real health care reform that actually would actually reduce in a more significant way the cost of health care, which would have been, at the very least, some form of public option. And number 3, tax the wealthy. So if you put all those 3 things together, that's 69% of people that say, you don't need to do this, aren't wrong. But as we know, none of that was done. So we are where we are. Does Obama have real choices now?
You won't solve the problem by August 2nd either. But, you're absolutely right. In particular, if you just let the government bid down the prices of pharmaceuticals and healthcare, you could save literally, trillions of dollars over the next 10 years. I mean, that's an easy step these guys could take. And you know that neither the president nor the Republicans is going to do that.
Well, actually, that on that particular point, that's something President Obama gave away early in the negotiations on the health care bill. He
Yes.
made a deal with Pharma early on, not to do that, so
I
they
know.
wouldn't buy TV ads attacking his reforms.
Alas, yes.
Okay, we've done the context, so now we are where we are. So first of all, what choices does President Obama have now? I mean, he's clearly saying that he's willing to put on the table. I'm supposed to just be a more straight interviewer here, but I can't. When I hear him say I have to give up some of my favorite programs, when he's talking about is giving up things that are going to cause such suffering. It's not about his wishes being violated in some way.
Look, there in particular, the one that sticks in everybody's craw that has any general knowledge of the real economics of the program is Social Security. I mean, even the president's supporters concede that, say, out to the year 2050, Social Security's contribution to the deficit is unreformed, might be add up to 1% or something like that. They nevertheless make as a percentage of GDP. And yet they nevertheless insist on cutting it now, claiming to save the program. But actually, when you read their fine print, what they actually say is, well, we just have to prove we can do this to signal financial markets that we're not Greece.
Yeah, but I mean, President Obama says that specifically in the press conference. He was asked directly about Social Security. He says Social Security is not the cause of this crisis, but then he goes on to say, but now's a good time to reform it, because when will we if we don't do it now?
Yeah, I mean, that really is hard to swallow. I mean, the essentially two-faced character of the White House assertions here are just, they're outrageous. It's why a lot of Democrats in Congress simply can't stomach that one. And the truth is, in medical care, we mentioned the pharmaceutical bidding business, a serious effort on antitrust, a large chunk of the growth in medical spending comes from the fact that you've got just one island of oligopolies after another in that place, and that, despite the nonsense about how patients are somehow supposed to control their doctors, they can't in most cases. You're not in a position to second guess somebody who says you need an MRI, say, or whether or two MRIs, and you need there some serious antitrust. This is not anything the White House has ever been interested in.
But let me ask you something specific more about Obama's press conference. Here's a little segment from one of his answers to the journalists.
What we can do is to solve this underlying debt and deficit problem for a long period of time, so that then we can get back to having a conversation about, all right, since we now have solved this problem, that's no longer what's hampering economic growth. That's not feeding business and uncertainty. Everybody feels that the ground is stable under our feet. Are there some strategies that we could pursue that would really focus on some targeted job growth? Infrastructure being a primary example.
What do you make of the logic?
Alice in Wonderland. I mean, they don't need targeted jobs growth. They need a massive jobs program. I mean, we're now 3 years into this thing, and unemployment is 9.2%. All of their claims that, green shoots, the summer of recovery, all that stuff they were saying, none of that has proven out, as, Paul, forgive me if I remind you that I and others told you this on camera over the last couple of years, that this was always going to be nonsense. And this is not a problem of targets and narrow spending. They need a massive jobs program. You are stuck here. Despite all the claims, the president had really no business validating that claim that, oh, it's uncertainty that's holding back
Well,
business.
yeah, that was what I was getting at
Yeah.
with this quote, is that
Yeah.
he's essentially giving almost word for word the same argument the Republicans give, that we
That's
need
right.
to deal
Yeah.
with the debt side in order to get business investing again.
Yeah, I mean, the other element of uncertainty they often adduce is regulatory uncertainty. And look, in the late 30s, or rather in the mid 30s, when the government moved vigorously on unemployment, that is up till 1937, there was plenty of uncertainty. There were huge numbers of folks in the business community who actually believed, as distinct from merely saying, which, because I think most of them know better now, that the president, who was then Franklin Roosevelt, was a socialist. They nevertheless invested as aggregate demand rose because the government primed the pump. If they did that again, that's what would happen now. This regulatory uncertainty business is basically nonsense. It's not the problem. The problem is that the economy is dead in the water, and nobody is going to take on any more people to hire than they can see for sure that they can keep for a while. And
Okay, so
right
let me
now,
ask you a question here.
Yep.
So if he buys into the debt stuff, which he has,
Yep.
and he comes to some kind of compromise where apparently what they're going to come to, the pundits are speculating, is the Republicans will find some disguised way to allow a certain amount of tax increases, like closing loopholes and things. What they do get on the side of the Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, which are on the table, are things that everyone thought were supposedly unimaginable because Obama had previously said he wouldn't go there. So let's say they do all of that. No stimulus really on the table whatsoever. How the heck does President Obama go into an election with this kind of economy, which has clearly got to tank into even deeper recession after
now,
all
look,
of this?
this is a serious problem. Nobody I know who looks at this problem seriously is anything other than really quite scared, because it's not just the U.S., it's just about everywhere in the world is headed down. And I mean, even China's showing signs of sort of slowing down. Yeah, I mean, you've got a fairly, it has a scary resemblance to 1931 in the Great Depression, 2 years after the collapse of Wall Street. Central Europe collapsed and took down the rest of the world. That sound familiar? That's sort of what's happening right now. The White House signed on to this sort of business about worldwide austerity back in Toronto, right, in the summer
G20.
of 2010. Yeah, and they need to give this stuff up, and they got to do it as fast as possible. Otherwise you're going to be stuck at 9% plus unemployment for a long time, and in a situation where fuel prices are going to remain very high.
Well, they're heading very fast further down the austerity path. Thanks very much for joining us, Tom.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.